Hello everyone and welcome back to Studio Sense for day 2 of my top 10 inexpensive yet sexy designer date night fragrances for men. I think we stopped with Dolce & Gabbana's The One EDP yesterday. So today we're gonna pick right back up into it because we have a lot to go over and I don't wanna keep you super long because I know I have a tendency to be verbose about those things that I feel passionate about. And I definitely feel passionate about your dating success and your fragrance success.
I'm waiting for something.
Next up is YSL's La Nuit de Lhomme. La Nuit de Lhomme has been around for a long time. It is a classic date night fragrance that is definitely worth a revisit. Similar to Eros, its popularity is such that it's been around long enough to where the price has spiked and then come down to a nice median where it's pretty much affordable to your average person. Now this is the 60 ml bottle, and as such it is available in the 60 ml and 100 ml bottle. You choose what you want to choose, but again, for my purposes here, I would start out with the 60 ml. Now, out of all the fragrances on this list, this guy right here is the most changeable. Now, what I mean by that, changeable as in chameleon-like. So what you smell in the very beginning is not necessarily what you end up with at the dry down. They're both as attractive in their own right. It is a soft, slow burn with a quickly dissipating top layer of cardamom and bergamot, but it retains that softly sweet beginning down into the mid with lavender and cedarwood, resting on a base of amber, vetiver, and coumarin. La Nuit de Lhomme starts out like a soft, semi-sweet candle, but then burns down into a masterpiece. The dry down shifts into extremely alluring and attractive with that combination or mix or blend of amber and coumarin, and it just smells super heady. This fragrance lasts on me with a noticeable projection of about 3 hours and with an additional longevity of 3 hours for a total of 6 hours. So I get a good 6 to 7 hour longevity, which is really good with this because let me tell you, when you smell this, you don't think longevity, you don't think projection. It smells like it's gonna be a skin scent. You start out and you're like, okay, I smell this. It smells good, all right, I get it. I like that lavender, that coumarin, the cedar gives it the woody. It's a very, very extremely well balanced blend. But what's interesting about this is when you first smell it, it does smell like something like a candle, and you don't necessarily attribute masculinity and charisma and seduction and allure to it. Now, some may when you first smell it, and that's perfectly fine. But what I can say with 100% assurity is that when it dries down, that's the only thing on your mind, is extremely alluring, extremely seductive, and perfect for intimate settings. This is a surprise. This guy right here is a little bit of a surprise. And what I love about this is it's almost like a dark horse. Now it's been around long enough to where it's gained notoriety for that particular trait or quality. But if you've never tried it, it's gonna be a nice surprise to you. This is one of my favorite dark horse date night and inexpensive fragrances. Now there is the Eau de Parfum version of La Nuit de Lhomme, but it smells completely different than this. For my purposes, I'm gonna stick to the EDT, the Eau de Toilette. I've got both. I really like this for some reason. It's just my favorite. I like the EDP for different reasons, but for a date night, intimate setting fragrance, you can't do any better than this. But for a date night, close, intimate conversation fragrance, you can't do any better than this. And if you do want to end up in the bedroom, this is the guy right here, as well as, I mean, these two work hand in hand. They work really, really well. Now I'm going to come out later on with a video about layering to show you how I do it. There's all kinds of ways to do it. None of them are necessarily wrong. There's not like a super strict, black and white one way to do something, but there are some ways that you can maximize your aroma, maximize your fragrance value in a specific way of layering. But these guys right here layer so very well together. They work really well. And you'll notice a pattern in layering. It's almost like fragrances that are non-aggressive or that are a little bit more subtle or softer layer very well. And fragrances that are super aggressive not necessarily work well together. So one that is a little bit more subtle layered with one that is a little bit more aggressive, that's a good combination. So like cats and dogs, goats and horses. There you go. Next up is Azzaro's Wanted by Night. Now this fragrance right here is so spicy and wonderful and aggressive. You know, when aggressive is appropriate in a dating situation and you want to kind of amp up the volume a little bit, this is your guy. Now it does still retain some subtlety. It's almost like Spice Bomb Extreme. You know, when you put that on, it's like there's no question that you're wearing something. When you have this on, there's no question that you're wearing Azzaro Wanted by Night. Now some people make fun of the chamber, the 45 chamber, but I really like it. I think it's super masculine. I think it's super cool. You're shooting bullets of desire. But no, it's a really neat bottle. Now, this one is price-wise right. I think the example that I'm actually going to show from fragrance.net is the 100ml bottle. So go ahead and go for the 100ml bottle. The one that's smaller, you still get the bottle presentation. That's what's really neat about the 50ml bottle, is you still get the chamber and the presentation. So that's kind of cool. That's just a little bit smaller version of it, but for bang for the buck. And this, by the way, is a lot different than the lighter version, which is Wanted by Azzaro. This is definitely the date night or clubbing version of this. This is what's been called a club banger. I agree that this continues to be a club banger, but there is a place for this in an intimate setting. There again, if you want to be a little bit more aggressive, and when I say aggressive, I don't at all mean like, you're gonna go out with me, right? And you're cornering somebody. Let's say you're already on your third or fourth date. This is when it would be appropriate to wear Azzaro Wanted by Night, because you can amp up the speed at which you're kind of attacking things. Sound like it's going to be a fight. This will get you where you want to be quicker. This is the best way to put it, because it smells so good. And its hook, its attraction, you don't have to wait for it to be released in that mid to dry down. It's right there in the very beginning. And it retains that scent profile throughout the entire life of this. This has, not necessarily because it's eau de parfum, but one of the great things about the eau de parfum version of this is that it really captures the essence of what's great about it, and it gives it to you from beginning to end. You don't have to wait for that payout. It's instant gratification right here in a bottle. It is a wonderful blend of temptation and masculinity in a bottle. You've got some masculine woods, you've got spices. It is a oriental little balm. You've got notes of tobacco, you've got red cedar, I think Atlas cedar as well. There's just a lot of stuff in this. But instead of focusing on what kind of notes are particularly in this fragrance, focus on the outcome. The fact is, this is one of the, Azzaro as a house has a great track record. This is no exception. The blend in this guy is amazing. It's really close in terms of Dolce & Gabbana's The One as to which one I like the best. And just when I think The One is going to win out, I smell this and it's really hard to pick a favorite. So that's why I included it in this list. This guy right here, I've had so many compliments from. Excellent, excellent compliment getter. It is a fantastic conversation piece. You know, I've broken up into intimate gatherings or groups of people wearing this. Within the first few seconds of my introduction, they're like, what is it you're wearing? People beside them agree, that smells really good. I even had somebody smell my collar like twice. I had to lean in close so they could smell it a couple of times because I had sprayed it here and it had gotten off on my collar. It's an extremely consistent compliment getter. One thing you will notice about a lot of these that they all have in common, tangent at which they meet, is that they do have very similar notes. Like, and this is this way for a reason, because there are certain notes that create an atmosphere of intimacy, certain notes that create an atmosphere of seduction and of allure, and that are like softly whispered promises. And that is tobacco, when it's done, not like heavy, strong tobacco, but a very light hint of, right? And that's true for most of these notes. So a hint of tobacco, a hint of vanilla, a hint of tonka, a hint of coumarin, patchouli, earthy. So earthy, intimate. So all these notes are going to be featured in most of these fragrances, with a few exceptions. And the exceptions are there because they are exceptions, not necessarily because they need those notes. But it's interesting, isn't it? Like, again, the similarities in what attracts all of us are all infused in these fragrances. So it's kind of neat as well. We're gonna pick right back up on the success track with a mass appealing banger of a fragrance, and that is YSL Y. That's right. You thought I was gonna stray away from the crowd-pleasing, mass-appealing compliment getters, but I gotta throw this one in the bunch. Why? It's just a fantastic fragrance all around, and I think a lot of people think it's just a standard freshie, but it does have some really seductive and sensual appeal there, and I'll explain why. I mentioned yesterday that you want to smell different from all the other guys that she smelled, with one exception. What about that guy that has really good taste in cars and clothes and in fragrance? This might remind her of someone that she has smelled recently wearing this fragrance and who is very successful. And to me, this embodies and captures the essence of that youthful vigor and spirit and energy connected with success. It is a juxtaposition, even as the marketing campaign was talking about that being like kind of the balance between freshness and strength, freshness and power, like being in a chic black suit with a black tie. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, but remember, the same thing that attracts a woman to you in a dating situation aren't the same things that will keep her with you. What does that mean? Well, I mean, think about it. A woman says that she's not looking for like a dangerous or bad boy kind of type or vibe. Really, they kind of are. You'll hear women say things like, I just want someone who is stable and reliable and trustworthy and gosh darn, just straight up honest. Well, they may think they want those things, and ultimately they do down the road in an actual relationship, but women love opening up packages, right? They love opening up presents. Why YSLY will actually allow her to open up you as a present as something sort of semi-mysterious, a little bit of a bad boy vibe, not so far as, you know, kind of like bad boy tribal tattoo on your face, which if you're the kind of guy that's watching this that has a tribal tattoo on your face and you can rock that out, more power to you. I think it's fantastic. I can't get away with that. But what women are looking for is they are looking for that kind of semi-dangerous, semi-mysterious, predictable yet unpredictable kind of guy or set scenario or situation, and this is going to put them in mind of that. Also someone who is already come to terms with their own personal success, because this is, again, a very crowd-pleasing, mass-appealing, compliment-getting fragrance. It features notes of bergamot, ginger, lemon, mint. In the top, in the mid, you've got violet, sage, geranium, white aldehydes, resting on a base of musk, balsam fir, cedar, and some other notes that are just really well grounded. Now this does have a semi-sweet off the top, but that sweetness dries down into a very manly, masculine, charismatic fragrance. And again, it is very, very crowd-pleasing, very fresh, it's got kind of like a high-class, soapy, fresh feel to it. Puts you in the mind of success. And that's why I'm including it in my top 10 inexpensive yet sexy date night fragrances. Now this is probably the most expensive fragrance in this list today, but you can still get it for relatively inexpensive. And as you can see, I'm getting it in a smaller quantity because as I mentioned yesterday, I think that's more important because I'm all about quantity of fragrances as opposed to quantity of one particular fragrance. Nothing sets the mood better than a good oud. That's right. Boss Bottled Oud, I think, is a wonderful date night fragrance. This is a very, very fresh and spicy oriental wonder. It's a dark invitation to see what lies beyond its spicy, citrusy, apple opening, featuring saffron, clove, cinnamon, on a base of oud, sandalwood, and cypriol oil. Now cypriol oil is it's similar to papyrus. It's a very earthy, tenacious fragrance with a spicy overtone or spicy note to it. This fragrance tells her that you too are different from the crowd. You're sexy yet tenacious, that you won't give up without good reason, and you're not afraid to be different. Now I'm not talking about different as in I'm gonna spend my Friday night feeding dollar bills into the claw machine trying to get a rubber Pikachu kind of different, but different from the standard gentleman walking around out there. Such a wonderful, dusty, earthy, seductive fragrance. This is one of my favorite types of oud, and definitely making the list of your rotation top 10 inexpensive fragrances that are very sexy for date night fragrances. Next up may come as a bit of a surprise, but our next fragrance is Guess 1981. I can't tell you how much this fragrance reminds me of the 80s, not just me, but many who have actually smelled it. It is a nostalgic refrain. When you smell it, you're instantly transported back into the days of 80s hair bands, the Rubik's Cube. Bright primary colors seem to be in fashion or in vogue. Oh gosh, there's so many things that are retro. And if you haven't noticed, retro is in. The 80s are in. The last season of Stranger Things was focusing on the 80s and the advent of the shopping mall. And that's what this makes me think of. However, what makes it great as a sexy date night fragrance is how well it uses violet leaf. Now, violet leaf is something, when done right, creates a very seductive, sweet fragrance. And they have done it exactly right in Guess 1981. Now, the thing about retro, it is cyclical. Now, 4 or 5 years down the road, you might not want to have this in your rotation, but you can safely have it in your rotation right now, because who knows how long it's going to be popular before it actually goes away and something else takes its place. But right now, you can definitely use this as a sexy date night fragrance, and it will spawn some nostalgic memories for both her and you. It features notes of oak moss, leather, amber, labdanum, violet, as I mentioned. The only challenge for this fragrance is it does sit pretty close to your skin about 30 to 45 minutes after you spray it. So don't be afraid to use it. Don't be conservative with it. Spray it effusively if you have to prior to going to your date or your engagement. But believe it or not, it does have really good longevity. I get about 6 to 7 hours of longevity out of this. So it is a very stand-up guy. It's very stable. 1980s can harken memories of AC/DC, Motley Crue, or Air Supply. It just depends on which end of the spectrum that you fall in. I absolutely love. I'm actually wearing this fragrance right now. It is so good. It is one of my favorite Guess fragrances, and surprisingly makes my top 10 inexpensive yet sexy date night fragrances for men. It is probably the second cheapest on my list. One of the best retro fragrances that will conjure up all the right feelings and memories of this nostalgic 1980s. Up next is another Hugo Boss fantastic fragrance. It is Hugo Boss The Scent Absolute. It is one of my favorite Hugo Boss fragrances. It is a very simple profile, a very simple scent profile. It only has a few notes in it, including maninka fruit, ginger, mondia root, and at the very base, vetiver. This is definitely a date night banger in my estimation, but it is projecting a little bit more mature of a man, someone who's very assured, who knows what they want, who's very sophisticated, yet charming in a way that she can relate to, charming in a way that makes her want to unravel you, unwrap you, to figure out who the deeper you are, get deeper into that onion. The Scent Absolute is for the man who knows what he wants and isn't afraid to take it. I don't mean take it in the Weinstein way. You don't want to burn victim her. Ugh. Success has a way of leaving clues, and one of the clues is this fragrance. This intense oriental fragrance smoky wonder will have her scooching her chair in closer so that she can smell more of it with you. Featuring oxytocin inducing notes such as maninka fruit, mondia root, and vetiver. Now, maninka fruit, if you've never smelled it before, it is often considered an exotic aphrodisiac by many, and the spicy ginger is what causes it to kick right off your skin and into her nostrils. It almost has like an effervescent feel to it when you spray on it. It's kind of like a dusty, deep, dark, spicy fragrance. There's not a lot that can be said about this other than the fact that it is extremely heady and intoxicating. Oh my gosh, I could just spray this on all day long. This stuff right here is probably one of my favorite date night fragrances, simply because it's got such a mature yet invigorating. Maninka fruit is kind of a sweet fragrance. It does have a bold, sweet statement to it, but that sweetness kind of dries off a little bit. However, it is part of the DNA and the profile of this fragrance, so it doesn't go away completely. So it's kind of like the way that you want to represent yourself. You want to represent yourself as kind of a semi-mysterious person, but you do have that sweetness that all women want and desire in their significant other, in their prospectus, and yet you don't come off overly much. It is just the right balance. It is a little bit boozy, a little bit rummy at times. I do like that about it. In fact, this may sound kind of crazy, but if you've ever seen the original animated Batman, the kind of noir one, I think it was back in the 90s. It was like back in the 90s. Anyway, this kind of reminds me of a warehouse in that animated feature where there are casks of rum that are sitting there aging right before Batman busts in and breaks up some, a gang of mobsters or ne'er-do-wells or whatever. So this is going to be absolutely one of my favorite mature man fragrances for date nights, and it is relatively inexpensive. Now this one will probably surprise you. It is our last and final example of top 10 inexpensive yet sexy date night fragrances, designer date night fragrances for men, and that is Fiat 500 for men, for him. The actual name is Fiat 500 for him. The Fiat 500 for her is featuring a white bottle, and for him it's just this gray bottle here. Now the car is rather small, and this is the actual front of the vehicle. In fact, the vehicle is so small, this is almost to scale for the Fiat itself. No, just kidding. But I do like the presentation. Some people might think it's kind of quirky, but I like quirky. Quirky's never bad, right? If it's done well and if it's done right. Now the awesome thing about this fragrance, oh my gosh. The great thing about this fragrance, other than being super inexpensive, in fact, as I mentioned, this is the most inexpensive fragrance in this list. I got it for $10, literally $10, $9.99. Second only to Guess 1981. So super inexpensive. And it does feature notes such as grapefruit, pink and black pepper, patchouli, iris, geranium, sandalwood, and white musk. There's a good bit of white musk in here. Now with all that pepper and spices in it, you would think that this would be super strong and come off strong. It isn't. It's actually a very soft, subdued fragrance. But don't get me wrong, it is super masculine. Now a lot of car manufacturer fragrances want to go for something that's sort of like a new car smell. So this does have kind of a leathery overtone to it, but never in a bad way. It's not off-putting. It's actually very seductive, very attractive. So this to me is almost like the penultimate of charismatic, masculine man. And if you don't believe me, just check out this commercial spot.
By Cinquecento.
That's pretty good. This to me is an underrated underdog fragrance because a lot of car manufacturer fragrances aren't super popular, but this is more on the high-end side, very similar to Mercedes or Bentley that are very successful with their fragrance line. So underappreciated, and it's super cheap because not a lot of people are talking about this. Actually, nobody's talking about this. I think I'm probably one of the first. Fiat 500 for men. Very last in the list of 10. All right, guys, that concludes my top 10 inexpensive yet sexy designer date night fragrances for men. Now, if you have used these fragrances in the past and developed an opinion about them, please leave your comments below. If you have other fragrances that you think are better or similar that you can add to the list, also leave your comments below. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate your time. More than anything, thank you so much for your support. As Sade says, minimum waste, maximum joy. I'm Tommy with Studio Sense, and I'll see you next time.